The year was 1929. The air hung thick with dust as French archaeologists labored under the scorching Mediterranean sun. On that fateful day at Ras Shamra, ancient Ugarit, their shovels struck something that would shatter biblical certainties forever. Buried for over 3,000 years, a cache of clay tablets lay hidden beneath the ruins of what was once a flourishing Canaanite city. As archaeologists delicately extracted these fragile remnants, none could have imagined the explosive revelation within their weathered surfaces. A story predating the Bible that would challenge the very foundations of Judeo-Christian belief. "These can't possibly be right," the lead archaeologist whispered as the first translations emerged. "This changes everything." Two tablets in particular, designated KTU-1100 and KTU-1107, contained a narrative so shocking, so eerily familiar, that scholars initially refused to accept their implications. Here, etched in Ugaritic, a cousin to biblical Hebrew, was a tale of paradise lost that predated Genesis by millennia. A divine garden on a sacred mountain, a primordial figure named Adammu, a malevolent serpent, the catastrophic loss of immortality. These weren't merely familiar elements, they were the unmistakable blueprints for humanity's most iconic origin story. But the most astonishing revelation was yet to come. What if Adam, the first man, originated not as the Bible's dust-formed human, but as the transformed identity of an ancient earth goddess? In this video, we unearth this censored history and confront the possibility that the Bible's creation narrative was not divine revelation, but a revolutionary adaptation of a far older mythology, one that biblical authors deliberately obscured, but could never fully erase. Prepare to witness the ancient story they never wanted you to know. Long before Moses received the Torah, before the Israelites settled the Promised Land, the ancient Near East teemed with sacred stories of paradise lost. In the cradle of civilization, the Sumerians told of a primordial paradise called Dilmun, an Eden-like realm where neither sickness nor death existed. When the water god Enki blessed this barren land, it transformed into a lush garden of otherworldly beauty, a place pure, clean, and bright, the ancient texts called it, where the lion does not kill, the wolf does not seize the lamb. Though scholars once identified Dilmun with modern Bahrain, ancient texts speak of mythical Mount Dilmun where the sun rises. This mountain paradise was where the Sumerian flood hero Ziud-Sudra was granted eternal life by the gods, much like the biblical Enoch, who walked with God and was not. The biblical Eden likewise appears not as a flat garden, but as a mountain sanctuary. Genesis describes four mighty rivers, the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, all originating from Eden's heights. Rivers do begin in mountains, sometimes not valleys, a geographical reality the biblical authors understood. The mountain identity of Eden becomes explicit in the book of Ezekiel, which declares, "You were in Eden, the garden of God. You were on the holy mountain of God." This is no mere poetic flourish, but a revelation of Eden's true cosmic geography. The Ugaritic texts reveal this same cosmic pattern. They speak of a sacred mountain where El, or Elu, the supreme god of the Canaanite pantheon, established his divine vineyard. This celestial summit formed the central axis of creation, connecting heaven and earth. At the heart of these mountain sanctuaries stood the sacred tree, a motif appearing across Near Eastern cultures. In Mesopotamian art, divine trees appear guarded by fantastic hybrid creatures. Throughout Canaan, most religious activities centered on sanctuaries called bamat, or high places, typically situated near prominent trees. These sacred trees were frequently associated with the goddess Asherah, whose worship continued in Judah even at the Jerusalem temple until the religious reforms of King Hezekiah and Josiah. Tree sanctuaries weren't peripheral to ancient Israelite religion. They were central until deliberately suppressed. Even Greek mythology preserves this ancient motif in the Garden of Hesperides at the western edge of the world. There, golden fruit grew on the sacred tree, guarded by a multi-headed serpent named Ladon, a name linguists have linked to the Canaanite chaos serpent Lotan, the biblical Leviathan. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from Ugarit to Greece, the same sacred geography emerges: a mountain paradise, a divine tree, supernatural guardians, and a primordial drama that forever altered human destiny. The biblical Eden narrative did not emerge from a vacuum, but from the rich mythological environment, and nowhere is this connection more evident than in the shocking story preserved at Ugarit. Unlike the Genesis account, the Canaanite story does not begin with creation, but with a cosmic rebellion. In the celestial realm ruled by El, the compassionate creator god, a powerful deity named Huron once held exalted position. Brilliant and favored, Huron stood among the divine council's inner circle, but ambition festered within him. Consumed by pride, Huron rebelled against El's supreme authority. His insurrection shook the heavens. For his treachery, Huron was cast down from the celestial heights, banished from divine communion. Burning with vengeance, the fallen god underwent a terrifying metamorphosis. His divine form twisted and contorted until Huron took the shape of a massive venomous serpent, a form associated with the fearsome chaos monster Lotanu and Bashan, precursors to the biblical Leviathan. Exactly who was Huron? Archaeological evidence reveals he was a complex deity of the underworld. Though receiving few sacrifices at Ugarit, his presence loomed large across Canaan. Two cities in the Israelite heartland, Upper and Lower Beth Horon, bore his name, marking locations of ancient sanctuaries dedicated to his worship. Most significantly, Canaanite texts identify Huron as a chief of demons and serpents, a being who could both punish with venomous creatures and offer protection from them. This ambiguity made him both feared and sought after, a deity operating in moral shadows. In his serpentine form, Huron slithered into a sacred garden, a divine vineyard, flourishing on the slopes of Mount Ararat. At the garden's center stood the tree of life, source of divine vitality and immortality for all creation. With calculated malice, the serpent struck. He poured deadly venom upon the life-giving fruit, poisoning the sacred tree. What was once the tree of life withered before our eyes, transforming into the tree of death. Darkness fell like a shroud. A poisoning cloud of disease spread across the cosmos. The very fabric of divine existence unraveled as immortality itself was threatened. Even the gods now faced the prospect of death. The divine council, led by El, convened an urgent session. Their solution? To dispatch a divine being named Adamu to counter Huron's devastation and restore the tree of life. Yes, you heard that correctly, Adamu. The name's similarity to the biblical Adam is no linguistic accident, but a direct connection hidden in plain sight for millennia. Empowered with authority over earth, Adamu descended to the garden, but upon arrival, he was immediately confronted by a vengeful Huron. The serpent struck with lightning speed, fangs sinking deep into Adamu's flesh, injecting him with venom. The bite proved fatal. Adamu, once immortal, now faced the cosmos' first death. Divine immortality slipped away, replaced by mortality's shadow. Paradise was lost, not through moral failing, but through direct assault by a vengeful deity. Adamu's wife, described in the text as a good-natured woman, responded with grief but remarkable agency. Unlike the biblical Eve, portrayed as temptress and transgressor, this divine woman appeals directly to the assembly of the gods, imploring them to bind the serpent and repair the cosmic damage. The sun god Shapsu took pity on the fallen Adamu and his wife. Though immortality was now lost forever, she bestowed upon them a precious gift: the power of procreation, the ability to continue life through offspring. Individual immortality gave way to generational continuity. In a surprising twist absent from Genesis, Horan eventually repented of his destructive actions. He returned to the garden, uprooted the poisoned tree of death, and attempted to detoxify it. Life could resume, albeit diminished and mortal. But the original tree of life was gone forever, marking a permanent cosmic transformation. This is the story that predates Genesis by centuries, even millennia. A tale not of human disobedience, but of divine conflict that forever altered the cosmos and established mortality as humanity's inescapable condition. The parallels between this ancient Canaanite myth and the Genesis account demand our attention. Both narratives feature a paradise garden as the setting for primordial events, a mountain location for this divine garden, a serpent figure that brings death and destruction, a sacred tree associated with life and immortality, a primordial man whose fate is tied to humanity's mortality, a supreme creator deity who responds to cosmic crisis, the permanent loss of an original state of immortality, and a female companion who plays a significant role. But these similarities, striking as they are, merely scratch the surface. The most revolutionary revelation concerns the very name Adam itself. Ancient texts from Ugarit, Ebla, Anatolia, and even Egypt make repeated references to a mysterious deity named Adama or Adamu. In the earliest texts, Adama appears clearly as a goddess, specifically an earth goddess and consort of Resheph, god of the underworld. Later, in Anatolia and Ugarit, Adamu is paired with the goddess Kubaba, who eventually evolves into Cybele, the great mother goddess of the Phrygians. The gender transformation of this deity across cultures provides a crucial missing link. According to linguist experts, the name means soil or earth, precisely matching the Hebrew word for Adam, which signifies both man and soil. This dual meaning isn't coincidental. Some scholars now propose that the Hebrew Adam represents a deliberate demythologization of the goddess Adama, a pattern seen repeatedly as polytheistic deities were transformed into abstract concepts in monotheistic texts. In other words, Adam, the Bible's first man, may have originated as an earth goddess. Biblical scholars Mauro Korpel and Johannes de Moor, who meticulously reconstructed this myth from damaged tablets, argue these similarities are too numerous and specific to be coincidental. In their groundbreaking analysis, they present compelling evidence that Genesis authors were intimately familiar with these earlier Canaanite traditions. The implications are profound. Rather than seeing Genesis as divine dictation without historical context, we must recognize it as emerging from a rich mythological landscape, one the biblical authors transformed with revolutionary theological purpose. The Genesis account doesn't simply copy these earlier myths, it radically reinterprets them. Where the Canaanite myth presents a cosmic drama among divine beings, Genesis offers a moral drama of human choice. Where Ugaritic texts portray humans as victims of divine conflict, Genesis establishes human moral responsibility. This doesn't necessarily diminish Genesis, it reveals its true revolutionary nature. The biblical authors weren't creating ex nihilo, but engaging with and transforming the dominant mythologies of their time. Their achievement was not invention, but radical reinterpretation. that forever changed humanity's self-understanding. The gods in this Canaanite drama provide startling insights into biblical characters when viewed through comparative mythological lens. El, the compassionate creator deity of the Ugaritic pantheon, bears unmistakable similarities to the Hebrew Elohim. Both preside over divine councils as wise creator gods. This is not coincidental. The very name El appears throughout the Hebrew Bible as a primary name for God. The Ugaritic texts describe El as dwelling at the fountainhead of the two rivers, at the confluence of the two floods, the Tigris and Euphrates, precisely matching Eden's geographical marker as the source of four rivers. This shared cosmic geography reveals deep mythological connections. Horan represents perhaps the most revolutionary parallel, a rebellious divine being who transforms into a serpent, bringing death to humanity. While Genesis portrays an unnamed serpent, later Jewish and Christian tradition identified this figure as Satan. The Canaanite myth makes explicit what Genesis merely implies, that the Eden serpent was no ordinary animal, but a fallen divine being. The progression becomes clear. Horan, the divine rebel, transformed into a venomous serpent, evolves into the unnamed serpent of Genesis, and finally emerges as Satan in later tradition. The continuity reveals how ancient mythological elements persisted as their theological interpretation transformed. Adamu, the divine being sent to restore order, but who instead falls victim to the serpent, provides a fascinating precursor to the biblical Adam. While Genesis portrays Adam as formed from dust, Adamu begins as a divine being with earthly dominion. Yet, both experience a tragic fall that introduces mortality to the human condition. The good-natured woman, who is Adamu's companion, differs dramatically from the portrayal of Eve, where Genesis presents Eve as a temptress and secondary creation. Adamu's wife shows remarkable agency, appealing directly to the gods for justice. Both female figures connect to the introduction of procreation, but their moral portrayal couldn't be more different. Shapsu, the sun goddess who bestows procreation as compensation for lost immortality, has no direct biblical parallel. Yet her active divine grace echoes the broader biblical theme of God's continuing provision even after human failure, a redemptive element preserved across both traditions. What we witness is not mere borrowing, but profound theological transformation. The Bible's authors didn't simply copy Canaanite mythology, they revolutionized it. They collapsed a diverse pantheon into a single deity, transformed divine drama into human moral choice, and established foundation for ethical monotheism that would reshape world history. This transformation wasn't instantaneous. Archaeological evidence reveals that early Israelite religion included many Canaanite elements, including worship of Asherah alongside Yahweh. The monotheistic-ish revolution emerged gradually, reaching its climax during the religious reforms of King Hezekiah and Josiah, who systematically purged these polytheistic elements. What Orthodox tradition presents as restoration of original monotheism, archaeological evidence suggests was actually revolutionary innovation, the birth of something unprecedented in human religious history. The biblical authors weren't simply preserving ancient truth, they were creating a new understanding of divinity that would reshape human consciousness. We see this with the Greeks at the same time in their philosophical schools, and you may actually could go back to the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten for forms of monotheism that go way, way back. When we step back from these ancient texts, a profound insight emerges that challenges conventional understanding of the Eden narrative. Those raised in Judeo-Christian tradition are accustomed to interpreting Genesis primarily as a story of human sin, human weakness, and human failure. But what if this familiar emphasis misses the story's deeper significance? If we approach Genesis without theological preconceptions, something startling emerges, a narrative revealing the limitations of divinity itself. Yahweh plants a garden, but requires someone to cultivate it. He creates Adam, but fails to anticipate his profound loneliness. He fashions animals as potential companions, but they prove inadequate. He finally creates Eve as suitable partner, But then a crafty serpent, a being Yahweh either cannot or chooses not to control, infiltrates paradise and unravels the divine plan. Unable to restore the original harmony, Yahweh resorts to expulsion. When we look closer at Eden's story, are we really seeing humans messing up? Or is it showing us that even God's perfect plans can break down? The Ugaritic myth presents a remarkably similar theme. The gods who created and ruled the cosmos find themselves powerless against the serpent that poisoned the garden. Only Horanu, an underworld deity outside the main pantheon, possessed the necessary knowledge to counteract the serpent's venom. Knowledge the high gods lacked. Across ancient mythologies, we encounter this primordial tension, chaos serpents representing forces that exist beyond divine control, threatening ordered creation, from Tiamat in Mesopotamia to Apophis in Egypt, from Leviathan in Canaan to Jormungandr in Norse myth. Serpent figures embody cosmic forces that even the gods struggle to subdue. The difference lies in how religious traditions resolve this ancient conflict. The Canaanite solution was to incorporate magic and multiple deities into their religious system, different gods for different threats. The revolutionary Israelite solution was to reject both magic and polytheism, insisting instead on ethical monotheism despite its theological challenges. By doing so, they created challenges in and of itself. This tension remains at the heart of the theological discourse. How can an all-powerful deity permit evil and suffering? The Eden narrative doesn't resolve this paradox. It acknowledges it. Both Genesis and its Canaanite predecessor recognize a profound truth. The universe contains elements that resist even divine control. Modern science offers intriguing parallels in chaos theory and quantum indeterminacy. The recognition that unpredictability is woven into reality's fabric. What ancient peoples expressed in mythological language, we now explore through mathematical equations. Yet both approaches acknowledge that complete determinism and control remain elusive. Viewed through this lens, Eden becomes not primarily a story of paradise lost through human transgression, but a primordial battlefield where order confronts chaos, where divine intention meets cosmic resistance. The enduring power of these narratives lies not in their historical claims, but in their existential insight into the fundamental tensions of existence. Not all scholars accept these revolutionary interpretations. Some point to the fragmentary nature of tablet KTU 1107 and the necessarily speculative elements in any reconstruction. Others suggest KTU 1100 functioned primarily as a practical incantation against snakebite rather than a comprehensive mythological narrative. Yet the parallels remain too numerous and specific to dismiss. The Ugaritic texts date to approximately the 13th century BCE, centuries before the final forms of Genesis were even thought of or emerged. The linguistic connection between Ugaritic and Hebrew is firmly established, and the geographical proximity of Ugarit to ancient Israel makes cultural transmission not just possible, but inevitable. What are we to make of these connections? For some scholars, they represent evidence that the Bible's foundational narratives are adaptations of earlier polytheistic myths, deliberately transformed to serve a monotheistic biblical theology. For others, these parallels simply demonstrate how universal religious themes were reinterpreted through distinctive lens of emerging ethical monotheism, the divine message adapting to human cultural frameworks. These findings don't diminish Scripture's spiritual significance, but enrich our understanding of how divine revelation works within human cultural contexts. Perhaps the most profound question is whether recognizing the Bible's mythological context diminishes its spiritual significance or enhances our understanding of its revolutionary nature. Does acknowledging its cultural embeddedness undermine faith? Or does it reveal the truly transformative character of biblical theology? The ancient tablets of Ugarit don't yield simple answers, but they reveal something crucial. The narratives may have considered uniquely biblical have deeper roots than previously acknowledged, roots extending into the rich cultural soil of ancient Canaanite mythology. What emerges from these fragments and echoes is both mystery and revelation. The past speaks across millennia in whispers and riddles. The story of Adamu and Horan, preserved in clay for over 3,000 years, invites us to reconsider not just biblical origins, but the very nature of religious tradition itself. As we continue excavating the ancient world's secrets, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Human engagement with the ultimate questions forms an intricate web of connection across time and cultures. The boundaries we've drawn between pagan and biblical, between myth and revelation, may be far more permeable than we've assumed. How many other biblical stories originated not as divine dictation from a blank slate, but as creative transformations of the rich mythological landscape of the ancient Near East? What might we learn by acknowledging rather than denying these connections? The search continues, the questions multiply, and the conversation between past and present grows ever more profound. What began with a shovel striking clay and Syrian soil has opened a window into humanity's shared spiritual heritage, a heritage both more complex and more unified than we've ever imagined. Perhaps the true revelation lies not in claiming exclusive divine communication, but in recognizing the universal human quest to understand our origins, our mortality, and our place in the cosmos. A quest that has taken countless forms across millennia, yet speaks to the same enduring mysteries we still confront today. In my years studying these ancient texts, one conclusion grows increasingly inescapable. What we often attribute to divine revelation may simply be powerful human storytelling. These narratives, whether Canaanite, Babylonian, or biblical, bear the unmistakable fingerprints of human authors, grappling with life's fundamental questions. We see human concerns, human politics, human fears and hopes woven throughout these so-called sacred texts. Their power lies not in supernatural origin, but in how they articulate our shared existential struggles. The gods of these stories, with their jealousies and limitations, resemble nothing so much as ourselves, magnified and projected onto the cosmos. Perhaps the most profound mystery isn't found in divine dictation, but in humanity's extraordinary capacity to create meaning through narrative, to transform ink on parchment or marks on clay into worlds that shape civilizations for millennia. In that uniquely human power lies something far more fascinating than claims of divine authorship.